All right, so we're back in Egypt, or we're leaving Egypt with the Israelites. And as they leave Egypt and they think that they're free, eventually the Pharaoh gets really angry and he wants to send his chariots and all his soldiers after them to just kill all the Israelites and be done with them. And so they pursue the Israelites who are leaving on foot, right? They're a bunch of slaves leaving Egypt on foot. They have nothing. They have no way of defending themselves or whatever. And so God defends them and sends a pillar of a cloud to lead them to where they need to go, and a pillar of fire behind them to protect them. So they get to the point where they've reached the Red Sea, right? And here we're talking about the parting of the Red Sea, and this is kind of like this is something created. This isn't real, of course. And the Israelites, Moses lifts his staff, and the waters go go back, and the people cross the Red Sea um, on their own, and they're able to pass through. And then the Egyptians follow in their chariots, and just as they're inside and the Israelites are on the far side, it's safe. The waters recede, and all of these Egyptians soldiers in their chariots are gone. Now, this seems like a fantastic story, but what's really fascinating is if um, you take a look at a portion of that Sea of Aqaba, which is like a little branch off of the Red Sea. You can see here in this picture there is a land bridge that's just barely covered by water. And it's possible that if there was kind of a drought or some kind of thing, there could have been land there. The Israelites crossed over, and then maybe the waters receded just at that point when those chariots came across. Now, you say, well, that's crazy. There's what kind of evidence do you have of that? And there actually is, which is kind of cool. Here's an example of the chariots who they would have had at that time. And here in the floor of the Sea of Aqaba, you will find different like wheels and coral that's up on its side, almost like now this is a 90-degree angle. Coral doesn't grow 90-degree angles unless it's growing around something that is made that way. So is this the upside down turned on its end, the chariot wheel? Also, what's really interesting are these pillars. There's two pillars. One pillar is over here on this side. Another pillar is on this side. What are these ancient pillars? What these pillars are, and there's just a little bit of writing on them. It's ancient. It says about King Solomon marking this spot as if eventually the king of Israel came down and he marked this spot with these pillars. Is it possible that the ancient Jews believed this was the actual place of the crossing and they put up a memorial for that? It boggles the imagination. So, as they wander through the desert, the Israelite people complain about how terrible it is. They're lost in the desert and things are not going well. And there's constantly God has to bail them out. And we have situations where God is like, that's it, I'm killing them all. And Moses has to say, you promised, right? You promised us that you will be our, God and we will be your people. So you don't get to just kill us because we're complaining. So Moses defends the people. And and it shows again, we always kind of wonder about stories where God acts like a human being, right? Where he changes his mind. We can't never trust those stories. It's a real good indicator that it's definitely a story. So here we have, through Egypt, across, and here's the Gulf of Aqaba. Here's where the possibility of where that is. And here is Mount Sinai. And when we get to Mount Sinai, and Canaan is up here to the north, so they had to end up there. But Mount Sinai is where we get the Ten Commandments, right? On Mount Sinai, Moses goes up the mountain and receives these Ten Commandments. And the people are down there, and it's like a month, and they think, well, the old guy's probably dead. Moses is probably dead. Let's just keep going, and let's create a god of our own because Moses' God abandoned us. So again, the people were not faithful. And so Moses finally comes down and he sees that they've built this golden calf. Um, and he's furious, and he takes the Ten Commandments and he throws them at this calf, and then he goes back up the mountain to get a new set of these Ten Commandments, and and God gives him the law, and they take that golden calf and they melt it down and they make an ark. They make a small golden box to house these holy Ten Commandments, and you see the Ten Commandments there. Now, as they wander through the desert, God is like, these people who have complained are not getting into the promised land. And so he punishes them by uh, making them making them go for 40 years through the desert. Now they didn't it really is not hard to it doesn't take 40 years to get through the desert, but this is symbolic. 40 is a long time in the Bible. Whenever you run into the number 40, it means a long time. And this means that they that Moses and these people were not going to be able to get into the promised land, that God was going to renew a set of people. So to get to the point where they're ready to get into the promised land, and Moses says, "All right, stop. We want to go over the law. We want to make sure that everybody agrees that this is the law that God has given us." And he makes this speech. And so then for the rest of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, there's just these 613 laws. And these laws, sometimes people say, well, I'm going to read the whole Bible, right? And they start at Genesis and they keep reading. There's all these cool stories and they're good. Move to Exodus, they get through the Moses story, and that's really fascinating. And then this is where they all get tripped up, is these this 613 laws, and so many of them are just kind of crazy, right? And are totally unuseful for us. Some examples are here for you to kind of look through. But there are things that don't apply to us. How you are not supposed to mix the utensils from one to the other. So, like the utensil you would use for the dairy products, you are not to use them with the meat. So imagine like stirring up like raw hamburger and taking that same utensil and going stirring the milk. That's super gross, right? But they wouldn't have known about bacteria and the like. So people would have gotten sick. Things like not eating pork. Well, pork is a meat that you have to really cook well. So what you have is a situation um, where these um, pigs were probably eaten like raw or not cooked well, and they were definitely and people got sick. So what did they think? They thought that people got sick because God didn't want them to eat pork, and so suddenly it turned into a religious law. And what they ended up being is health laws. You have situations in these health laws where they were religious, but the Jews always had these ritual washings where you would wash your hands before you did things like eat, right? So they were able to stay healthy because they did this ritual washing. And when they didn't do the ritual washing, bad things happen, right? If you don't wash your hands before you eat, you're going to get sick. They believed God was doing this to them. And so that's why you have a lot of these rules that were established for the people. Not because God wanted them to do these ritual washings, but kind of in reverse. They saw that the ritual washings were beneficial to them. And there's all kinds of things. Like the book of Leviticus deals with the um, the Levites were the group that held the Ark of the Covenant, and they were. Here's some more laws that we're not gonna go through. That's on you to go through, and so they were. The Levites were the ones in charge of the Ark of the Covenant. Here's an example of the Ark of the Covenant. The Jews do not have, it is lost to history, the actual Ark of the Covenant. But at that time, it was the main focus. This is where God lived. This is God's seat, they would say. And so, did not, so all these laws there are laws just about Levites and like how long the tassels on their robes were supposed to be. So things that don't apply to us. The Levites don't even like exist in regards to the Ark of the Covenant anymore. And so that's what we're talking about with some of these laws. So we'll talk about this next time.